note sheet, we're going to start with the standard form of quadratic functions. All right. We touched on this a little bit during the last lesson for factoring. Just now we're going to label it as a quadratic function. All right. This is taking a moment to wake up. All right. So the standard form would be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, so this should be familiar. You already know how to factor it. It's just now going to be officially called a quadratic equation since this unit is all about quadratics. All right, a, b, and c would be replaced with numbers. And what's unique about quadratic equations is that there will always be an x squared in it. So that's what makes it the U-shaped graph, is by having this x squared. Other parts might be missing, that's fine, but you'll definitely have an x squared in it, and you won't have an exponent higher than the 2 in them. You'll notice that when you enter them into the Desmos, you get a U-shaped graph, and that's going to be called a parabola. So like I was saying with basketball, or like even baseball, if you hit a ball like really far, it gets to a highest point and then it declines really similar to the way it started. All right, or same with like when you're shooting a basket, you get to a highest point and then it declines. Or if you're talking about like a roller coaster, you get to a lowest point and then you go back up. So it's going to either open upwards or downwards. And that depends on how the equation looks. So what's the difference between these two equations on the x squareds? One of them has a negative and the other one is positive. So we're going to have what's known as like positive and negative quadratics. All right. What I'm going to have you try out for a second is open up your Chromebooks to desmos.com. I'm going to have you be more familiar with that calculator now, since that's the one we're using on the test. And if you don't have your Chromebook, you can calculate all of this by hand, but Desmos does make your life a little easier. All right, so if you go to desmos.com and hit graphing calculator, and if you type in the equation exactly how it looks on your paper, so x squared plus 2x minus 5, all right, notice you get a U-shaped graph. Actually, as soon as I entered the x squared part, it gave me a U-shaped graph, because that's what makes it the U-shaped graph. But then we had this part in it. All right, so from this graph that you made on Desmos, you're going to sketch that on your paper under that equation. So just a rough sketch for right now. Tomorrow we'll do like really accurate sketches. All right, so it looks something like that. We have the lowest point in this quadrant, quadrant 3, and then it opens up upward. All right, so the bottom line is that if your x squared or your a value is positive, the parabola opens up like a smile. Right? Really easy way to remember that is, you know, when positive things happen, they make you smile. Like when you get paid, or when you buy something that you really wanted, or when you get a compliment, right? So the graph will look like a smile if it's a positive quadratic. All right, what do you think this other graph will look like? Which way will it open? Down, good. You can even try that out. I'll show you on Desmos. You can enter this exactly how it looks into the calculator, and you'll see that it looks something like this, if I remember correctly. All right, so when it's negative, the parabola opens down like a frown. All right, that one rhymes, so that's why you remember that. So if I go back to this and I adjust my formula, as soon as I put that negative in front of the x squared, it becomes negative, or it opens downward. So it was upward before. As soon as we put that minus sign, it becomes where it opens downward. And then the rest of it was plus 3x plus 7. All right, and that's the graph that we are sketching on our note sheet. All right, the highest point is in the first quadrant up here, and then it opens downward. All right, any questions about that? All right, so that knocks off one of the success criteria. Can you determine if it's a positive or a negative parabola? The next thing we're going to look at, so another new vocabulary word, is what's called axis of symmetry. So what does symmetry mean? It's the same on both sides. If I have an axis of symmetry, that's going to be the vertical line right? The vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. All right, so parabolas are symmetrical. Your axis of symmetry is the vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. So in our rough sketch up here, my axis of symmetry would go right down the middle for both graphs. So it divides it into two equal parts, kind of like a mirror. All right, the formula for axis of symmetry, so we're going to solve it algebraically and graphically. But the formula is negative b over 2a. And that's x equals negative b over 2a. All right, x equals negative b over 2a. So we'll get to that, how to use that formula in the examples. One more thing, one more vocab word for you before we do examples is what's called a vertex. So vertex, that's going to be a coordinate. And I know that it's been a long time since we've done stuff with coordinates, but that's the x, y stuff, right? So that's what a coordinate looks like, x, y. The vertex is going to be the turning point. The turning point of the parabola. All right, the turning point of the parabola. So depending on what type of graph you're looking at, positive or negative, it might be the lowest point or the highest point. So like going back up here to our sketches. My vertex for my positive graphs So where the graph starts to like change direction is where your vertex is, like the curvy part. Right. Right? For the negative one, my vertex would be at the very top. So in that case, for positive, since it's at the lower point of the graph, the vertex is going to be called a minimum. So that's the smallest point that it could be. Minimum, yes. Like minimum weight. Lowest you get. All right. The highest point is called maximum. So back to our negative graphs, it would be the highest point on your graph. That is your maximum. So like if I'm talking about a ball being thrown, that's the highest that it went in that activity. All right, so questions about any of the vocabulary? All right, Landon, face forward. So then down here, we're going to put it all together. We're going to look at a quadratic function that we're given and identify those two things graphically and algebraically. Starting with the axis of symmetry. So what I would do is I would always write down my formula for axis of symmetry, because I've seen students make mistakes where they forget that that b is supposed to be negative. All right, so it's negative in the formula. So make sure you're just writing out the formula so you don't make that mistake. All right, now we're going to plug in our a and our b value into this formula. So think back to standard form. It's ax squared plus bx plus c. What is what's my a value in this first quadratic? So it's the number in front of the x squared. So the number in front of the x squared for this one is 1. All right, what would the b value be? So just over here on this side, we'll plug it in over here in a second, but over here it would be 8. And I know we're not using c for anything, but what would the c value be? 15. All right, we'll use c in the future. But that's just where we're getting on. All right, so plug it into your formula. And whenever you plug something in, put it in parentheses so you can avoid making mistakes. So my b value was 8. My a value we said was 1. Right? In the numerator, we simplify that, we get -8. What do we get in the denominator? 2. That's 2 times 1. And then keep simplifying. -8 divided by 2 is -4. Sorry, let me see if this is important. Oh. Sorry. Waiting on important. So -4 is what we get for our axis of symmetry. And you always write it as x equals, because it's a line. So it's going to be x equals -4. All right, questions about how we solve that algebraically? Yes. Yes. All right, now let's talk about the vertex, how to solve that algebraically. And for this, you're going to have to kind of reflect back to like semester 1. right, the vertex we said is x comma y, and we do know what the x value is. What is the x value? It is -4. And we know that because we solved for it when we did axis of symmetry. All right, so then we know what the x is. Anyone have an idea of how I can figure out what the y is? Good. Well, no, not the c. You plug in the x, and I plug it into the equation that I was originally given. All right, so I'm going to take y equals x squared plus 8x plus 15. And since I already know that the x is -4, I'm going to plug that in for the x. Is this bringing back memories? We did this in semester 1. Remember, we focused a lot on like input and output. All right, so by plugging in x into the equation that we're given, we can solve for y. And not that I don't trust that you guys can do this by hand, but my suggestion would be to use your calculator, because I've been seeing people make silly mistakes, and that throws off the rest of the result. All right, so I would plug this into Desmos exactly how it looks on my paper, with the parentheses and everything. So take a moment and practice doing that. All right, I'll start working it out by hand, so just so you can see that you can get the same answer when you do it correctly. So try it out in your calculators. And then once you've entered it in your calculator, what do you get for your y value? All right, -1. So that is my y value. That's the other half of my vertex. All right. Last thing that you'll do is sketch your graph, and you can use Desmos for that. But also, before I even enter it into Desmos, which direction is this parabola going to open? Up or down? It is going to open upward. How do you know that? Because the x squared is positive. That's what tells us what direction it opens. So what I'm looking for on your practice is, did you sketch it opening the correct way? Did you draw your vertex in? So like this time it would be the lowest point. And then did you also draw your axis of symmetry in the right spot, which would be right down the middle of your parabola and the label. All right, so all of that I figured out algebraically, but I also want you to check your answers with the Desmos calculator that you are lucky enough to use on this test. So like take a moment and type in the equation that you're given. So y equals x squared plus 8x plus 15. All right, I'll come back to this page in a second. But I entered it into Desmos, and if I hover over where the vertex would be, so down here, does that match up with what we solved algebraically? I don't know if you can see that. Right there? Yes. So that's what I want you to do as you're going through your practice. All right, and I got this graph just by simply typing in what I was given. All right, question. Are you ready to try one on your own? All right, so I'll have you try number 3 on your note sheet. Yes, once. So number 3 on your note sheet is going to be your turn. Give you like a minute and a half for that. All right, let's start going over 3 and seeing if you at least got a good start. So axis of symmetry, vertex, and a sketch is what we're told to figure out given this formula. So let's start out by labeling our A, B, and C values. What will A be? Our A value is, our B value is, and we're not using C today, but that would be good. Our formula for axis of symmetry, always start by writing it out and plugging in what we identified for our B value and our A value. All right, again, always use parentheses when you plug stuff in, because that'll help you avoid making mistakes. All right, so everyone got this far so far? Now, what did you notice when you plugged in the negative 12? So it's a negative 12. What happened? It becomes a positive because of that double negative. The denominator should be 6, as 2 times 3. So the correct axis of symmetry is 12 divided by 6, which is 2. And it needs to be a positive 2. So essentially, what this negative b is doing in this formula for axis of symmetry is making it opposite of whatever sign it is in your given equation. All right, so if it started out as negative, it's going to flip to positive. Make sense? All right. So now we need to figure out the vertex. How can I figure that out? Plug in the x value. What was the x value? 2. So that's what we just solved for with the axis of symmetry. Now we need to figure out the y by plugging it into the formula that we were given. So instead of x, we're going to put in 2. So 3 times 2 squared minus 12 times 2 plus 5. Right? Again, my suggestion would be to use the tools that you're given. Use the calculator, let it do order of operations for you. Because what I saw earlier was this. They did this first step, and they got 6 squared for the first part. Why is that incorrect? Because of order of operations. Does multiplication come first or does exponents come first? Exponents. So exponents, you would have to do 2 squared first, which is 4, times 3, which would be 12, not 6 squared, right? So use Desmos. Let me know what you get when you enter that for your y value. All right, so if you entered it correctly into Desmos, you should have gotten -7. All right, if you're not getting that, but if you think you're entering it correctly, let me know. I'll tell you what exactly you're doing wrong. I say put it in parentheses exactly how it looks on your paper. All right, good on that. All right, now when you sketched it, is this going to open upwards or downwards? Good, it does open upwards. Your vertex would be the lowest point, so it would be your minimum. And label it. And where would your axis of symmetry be? Right down the middle. And label that for our rough sketches. For our rough sketch, it's going to be x equals 2. Right, question? Yes, it is. Right, so try when you enter it, but like for all that. All right. The next one I'm going to have you look at is going to be number 9. So if there's no more questions on that one, let's scroll down to number 9. That way we're seeing something else that we haven't seen yet. All right, so scrolling down to number 9. All right, there's 2 things that we're going to see for the first time with number 9. Is what to do if there's stuff missing from your equation. So I'm missing something. What am I missing? Oh, I'm missing the p value, right? Because here's standard form again to reference. I have an a value. What would that be? And then I do have a c value. What would that be? 8. But I don't have a b value because it's not there at all. Like I don't have a term here with just an x for the first time. I have an x squared, I have a constant, but I don't have just an x term. Right? So I don't have a b. So what would be the value if I had to give it one? If it's not there at all, it would be 0. So it does have a value, it's 0. All right, and that's pretty much all you do. The rest is the same. You carry on with your equation like normal for axis of symmetry. All right, so take a second, plug in your b and your a value. All right, we get 0 divided by -4, which is 0. So then our axis of symmetry is 0. So that means the x value on our vertex is what? Is 0. And then now take a moment and solve for your y value. And if you know the answer, kind of hold it in your head for a second. right? So calculate y by plugging in x. Right, what do you get for your y value? It should just be a positive 8, right? So 0 squared is 0, negative 2 times 0 is 0, plus 8 is 8. All right, or just use your calculator to avoid those little mistakes. All right, question? All right, we're just gonna sketch it real quick. Before I even type it into Desmos, is this gonna be a positive or negative? Positive. So look at the x squared. Since it's negative, that means it's gonna open downwards, right? So here's our first negative example. That was the other thing I wanted to show you before I do time for this option. All right, so since the x squared is negative, it opens downwards, so that's what your sketch should look like. Label your vertex. This time it's at the top of your graph. And my axis of symmetry would go right down the middle, and it would be labeled as x equals to 0. Right, making sense? Right, and then type your answer in decimals by just typing in the given equation, and it should look just like this. All right, so I'll give you the rest of the time to work on your practice. That's 12 solid minutes. I think that's enough time to finish it potentially. I'm here if you have questions. You can work with your group members. Remember to check your answers as you go on the back wall. So it's posted there for you to check, not to copy, just to make sure you're doing it right. And then that is it. Yes. So just evens or odds on your worksheet.